We're going to start with an update on Timo Werner. He's in England, he'll have his medical today and complete a 6-month loan move from RB Leipzig to Tottenham. The deal also includes the option to buy in the summer for around £15 million, and Tottenham will pay his salary in full, which is around £4.3 million. Right, Sam, what do you think of this? Good move?
I think it's an all-right move. I don't want to sound like a pessimist, but obviously I watched him quite closely at Chelsea, and I think a lot of Chelsea fans will agree when they say that they backed him and they love that his aggression, the fact that he always worked, his determination as well as a player. But when you look at his goal record and what he's going to come in for, you know, he scored 23 goals in 89 appearances for Chelsea. This season he only has 2 goals in 14 appearances. And I think when you're looking at the contribution that Son has had in that squad, it's going to be quite difficult to replicate that or find a player that would do that. But I think if he is coming in to, you know, replace him for this time period, I think he's gonna struggle a little bit. And I also do think that they've got players that are similar to his mould in Brennan Johnson and Brian Gill, who's getting a lot more minutes in the Spurs squad. I do think, you know, under Ange, it might work a little bit better because of the fast-paced football, and he's obviously got clear confidence in what he can do at Spurs. But I don't know, I've been there before, you know. You've seen what he done at Chelsea, and obviously he was a part of a squad that won the Champions League, and you know a lot of people wanted to be behind him, but it just never really worked out. So going off of that, I'm still unsure.
It's not an emphatic yes there, is it? Is it a good move? Dan, what do you think?
I think there's a tiny part inside of Sam that's a little bit worried, almost doesn't want him to do well because it didn't go perfectly at Chelsea, so he'd almost be reluctant to see him do well at Spurs. I think at this moment in time, I think it's a really good move for the player. I think it's a sensible move from Tottenham on a low-risk 6-month loan. And I think if you look at Werner's body of work and when things went well at Leipzig, he's playing under a manager that's got a defined structure, that the teams that like to press. He played his best football under Nagelsmann. He had successful times at Leipzig under Rangnick and under Hasenhüttl as well. And all those managers kind of come in with the same kind of principles in how they play football. There was very much a Red Bull model, and I don't think the Spurs model is a million miles away from that. And I think when you put him in and amongst the Tottenham attackers that they have there already, if he's lining up with, say, Son and Brennan Johnson, I think that's an interchangeable front three there that will work well for Spurs. I think they're dangerous on the counter anyway. Son has maybe lost a yard of pace over the last year. He's still a very, very effective forward player, but I think he's not as quick as he once was. I think in transition and the way Tottenham build up, I actually think Werner will be a real asset, and as long as they're not having to rely on him as being the only person in the penalty box, because I think that's where maybe it fell down at Chelsea, having to play as that central striker. But I think also at Chelsea, he never got a defined run in the team. He was in and out. Some games he'd be on the left, some games he would be that central striker. So I think he struggled for consistency. It's
going to be similar at Spurs, though, if you think about it. You know, their front line is quite interchangeable. You know, Son's sometimes down the middle, sometimes on the left. Richarlison's down the middle. And I think I hear what you're saying, and I understand how it would make sense in the team, but at the same time, I'm just thinking about the output. And you know, Spurs create a lot of chances because they're an attacking team, and I think they might see that he might fall short. Obviously, we're not. It could be a completely different scenario to what's happening at Leipzig currently. But if you go off of what's happening there, 2 goals in 14 appearances coming into this squad that is creating a lot of chances, just don't see. It's still a good move because it's a loan and he's almost got something to prove again. But I don't know if he's going to be able to, you know, replicate that output that he did years ago under Nagelsmann.
Well, what do Tottenham fans think? Let us know. # transfer talk on X. All right, but now to a player that's attracting a lot of interest, Radu Dragusin. Tottenham are close to an agreement with Genoa. Talks are now in an advanced stage over a deal worth around £26 million. However, Bayern Munich are also interested and are speaking to his camp, but they haven't sent a bid as of yet. So as things stand, it would appear that Tottenham are in the driving seat. And by the way, Jed Spence would go the other way on loan. OK, Quaker, we'll get to you in a moment, but Dan, just explain why Tottenham are looking for a centre-back.
Well, they're short anyway, really, aren't they? Eric Dyer hasn't really been an Ange favourite so far this season. Even when they've had injuries, he's not found a place in the team. They've had problems with injuries. Van der Ven's been injured, Romero's been injured and suspended. So they almost need a third centre-half to cover both of those two, because for as long as I can remember this season, it feels like it's been Emerson Royal and Ben Davies at centre back, and they're quite simply not centre back. So they probably needed someone in the summer. Didn't manage to get another centre back over the line. Were concentrating on other targets. They've identified this player as someone who can come in and compete with the two centre backs that I've mentioned. So they're short, but it's more about getting a player in that fits what the manager wants to do, and perhaps there was players on the books that could play centre back that weren't fit for what the manager wants to do. Dragusin would come in and offer that. I think he probably offers a little bit of the traits that Van der Ven offers and a little bit of the traits that Romero offers. So in that essence, he can cover both. So they've just been quite simply short in that area and need someone who can come in and play.
But Kwaku, Tottenham want him, Bayern Munich want him too. Who needs him more?
That's what I'm going to explore now in terms of who needs him more. This is a situation that's contingent, it seems like, on Eric Dyer. Eric Dyer is a player that is of interest to Bayern Munich, and to be honest, both teams are in dire straits when it comes to their centre-back options. You look at it here at Spurs, go through it chronologically. Mickey van der Ven had a great start to his Spurs career, but got injured against Chelsea. Obviously, a defender that exhibits incredible attributes when it comes to physicality, pace, and Spurs really missed him since he went down with that hamstring injury. Christian Romero, again, a great centre-back, a World Cup winner, but perpetually injured and suspended, and Spurs can't really rely on him. The fact that he's only played 11 league games this season for Spurs out of a possible 20 just speaks to how unreliable he's been when it comes to availability. Eric Dyer, like I said, is a man that's been of interest to Bayern Munich. He's surplus to requirements of Spurs, and we heard Ange talk pretty sharply in the press conference about Eric Dyer and about his future at Spurs. He is injured at the moment, but we do know that Bayern Munich are interested in his services. You look at Ben Davies, a player that he's adapted to playing the centre-back, but he's a left-back by trade. If Spurs were playing a back three, you could understand him playing the left side of a back three. But in terms of a centre-back option long-term, it just doesn't really work for a team that are trying to contend for a place in the Champions League. It's a difficult situation for Spurs. It's Emerson Royal again. You look at a player like that who, again, a year ago seemed surplus to requirements at Spurs and has found himself playing in a position unfamiliar to himself. Again, equipped himself quite well, but he's not necessarily what Spurs need in that position. You can understand why they're after Dragusin. And you look at the numbers of Dragusin compared to the Spurs centre-backs at the moment. He's played 19 games this season, a lot more than the other Spurs centre-backs as well. Started all of those games. And you just look at the numbers when it comes to dual successes. He's a combative midfielder or defender. And when you saw Kevin Hatchard come on the show yesterday, he was waxing lyrical about Dragusin, about the fact that he comes from good sporting stock, the fact that his parents were international Romanian volleyball and basketball players, respectively. And he's a player that Nabade was on the show last week talking about him and comparing him to Van Dijk. I don't know if I'd go that far, but he's a centre-back that Spurs desperately need because he's got that physicality. And in a team where these centre-backs have been unreliable for various reasons, you can completely understand why Dragusin is a player that Spurs are very interested in. The problem is, Bayern Munich are also very interested in Dragusin, and they are a European powerhouse. They can probably offer more wages than Spurs, and they're a team that are playing Champions League football already. Dragusin is an experienced centre-back for a player that is only 21 years old. He's a Romanian international, and he did come through the Juve ranks, joined them at 17 years old, despite interest from Chelsea and PSG. So he's a player that a lot of teams are interested in, a lot of teams need, because there seems to be a dearth of quality when it comes to centre-backs in world football. And he's a player that has been schooled in Italy. He knows how to defend, and he's physically imposing. And Bayern Munich are pretty short of options. Like I said, they're in dire straits when it comes to centre-back options. Kim Min-jae has formed a formidable partnership with Upamecano, but Kim Min-jae is away at the Asian Cup this January. He's going to be away for a month. And then you look at Matthias de Ligt, a player that came in with great promise. Obviously, we all remember him in the 18-19 season for Ajax when they went on a magical run to the Champions League semi-final. But quite like his Ajax teammates, in terms of that team that got to that semi-final, hasn't really worked out for him in the moves that he's made, whether it's been Juventus or Bayern Munich. And he finds himself as a rotational piece as opposed to a starter at Bayern Munich. So you can see that both of these teams are desperately in need for a centre-back. And you can understand why they both want to bring Dragusin in. He's a player, like I say, Kev Hatchard talked really highly about him. And I'll throw it to you guys. Who do you think needs him more? Is it Bayern Munich or is it Spurs?
I actually think it's Bayern Munich. You know, when you look at their current state and the fact that they're still trying to bridge that gap between Leverkusen, who have had an incredible season so far, and the fact that Kim Min-jae, probably Tuchel's #1 option at centre back, I think him being out and the fact that it's quite clear that De Ligt isn't necessarily the centre-back that Tuchel wants, he needs someone to come straight into the squad and to play to a certain standard. But I think at Spurs, like you said, yes, those players aren't necessarily starters, and Van der Ven and Romero, obviously the clear two favourites. I think Emerson Royale and Davies have done all right when they've been put in. They've still won big games. You know, they've got a point against Manchester City as well. And I think at this current stage, I think Bayern Munich need him more. What do you reckon?
It's a tough one because both teams have different ambitions. Bayern Munich are looking to win their league and win the Champions League as well. You don't invest that amount of money in a player like Harry Kane and not expect to win the biggest trophies. Whereas Spurs at the beginning of the season probably would have aimed for top four. That would have been an ambitious aim. But that's where they're at the moment in terms of if you look at where the league has fallen. So both teams are in desperate need of a centre-back because they're both short of options. And if you're presented with both options as a player that wants to play at the highest level, Bayern Munich are probably that team that can offer you that right now. But again, we've seen how the feelings change around Spurs because of Ange Postecoglou and how people bought into his philosophy. It's a completely different feeling to when Antonio Conte was there, or when Jose Mourinho was there, or when Nuno was there even. And so I think that Spurs would be a good move for him. Obviously, the platform of the Premier League as well can allow you to maybe be seen by more people, and the PR is completely different. So for me, I think Spurs probably need him more. And if you're Spurs, you probably go all out for a player that can solve your problems, because starting players like Ben Davies and Emerson Royale centre-back is not the solution.